where are we practicing from? If we are practicing correctly, it very soon becomes clear that we cannot practice from the standpoint of the self. The self is, by its very nature, split. This becomes clear if we give ourselves in our practice. Trying to practice from the standpoint of the self, we might say the self-delusion, that is the delusion of a self, doesn't work. To put it bluntly, the self doesn't have a leg to stand on. For those of you who are not native English speakers, when something doesn't have a basis, we say, it doesn't have a leg to stand on, let alone two legs. Well, when we see clearly this self-centered self, it's by its very nature split. This is the basis of Buddhism as a religion. Dis-ease is inevitable. We cannot escape from it. The wavering of the mind is unavoidable for the self. For the self to try to seek something, it cannot help it. To seek something or to try to get away from something. This is the nature of the human self. And this becomes clear if we give ourselves to the practice. It very soon becomes clear that we cannot simply practice, how to say it, bringing ourselves to the practice. For example, bringing our own criteria, our own expectations, our own desires. This is what makes the practice difficult. The practice itself is not really difficult. It's the mind bringing all of this stuff with it that makes it seem difficult. So once it is clear from your own experience that we cannot practice from the standpoint of the self, the whole practice of Zazen, not just Zazen, but certainly Zazen, becomes that of letting go, not just in your head, but with your very body, letting go of everything that we carry along with us, to, in a very good sense, not know, not conceive, not expect, not have an agenda. In a word, this is what real shikantaza, or just sitting through, is. Sitting without bringing one thing, being fully there in the practice, giving all of yourself, and yet not bringing one thing. The fact that the self is split becomes very clear when we do shikantaza, sitting all the way through. It also becomes sometimes painfully clear if we really work with a koan. We try to cement ourselves to the koan, but we can't because we are split. This is, in a sense, what the koan is trying to show us, so that we can eventually, even just breathing itself, or the sitting itself, or if you have a koan, or the shikantaza, just sitting through, just giving all of ourselves without expectation, without a thing, in a very positive, a very good sense. not bringing a thing to the practice. If we do this, it becomes clear. How to put it? No self finds itself then in every situation and circumstance. In other words, being without self realizes itself in the situations, the circumstances of the world. To put it another way, awakening manifests in every situation and circumstance, precisely in being without self. We realize in our bones, not merely in our head, that we don't need a self-identity to hold on to hide behind. This is the delusion, based perhaps on some insecurity or what Buddhism speaks of as ignorance. We think somehow we can or we need to hide behind some self-identity, some shell. But do we? Is that perhaps what keeps us locked up, chained to ourselves? Finally, it becomes clear beyond the shadow of a doubt. Where do we practice from? We practice from right here. And we give all of ourselves right here. This is the beginning, the middle, and the end of practice. And that does go on without limit. I urge you, taking this time to sit together as you are, online, yes, but still coming together, practicing together like this. It's such a wonderful opportunity for each one of us in our own way to give all of ourselves to this marvelous practice, to not bring our own agenda with us. That's what we end up tripping over. It doesn't mean that anything goes. On the contrary, to be able to let go of your own agenda and not pick up another one, even a Buddhistic one or a Zenistic one. You don't need it. You don't need it. Be in this practice right now without an agenda, and then carry on your life that way. If you have a question from out of the practice, make it as clear and precise as you can. A clear answer or a clear question allows for a clear answer. What do you really want to ask? Make it clear. As the practice is sustained and deepened in samadhi, I assure you, these things become clear from the inside. What self-delusion can remain? I'd like to ask you, what chains do you still want to hold on to?
I find the splits and the difficulty, like I know it's here, but my mind is like, no way I'm going to sit there. I don't want to, and I got busy with this and that, and it's hard to, while knowing where it comes from or where to go to keep concentrated. Yeah, I don't know. As if I distract myself automatically. Like I don't, I know I don't have to, but automatically I start distracting myself. So how to deal with that?
Do you know what a default is?
Uh, the
Like with a
baseline?
computer, it automatically goes back. When nothing else happens, it will automatically go to the default that it is
Yeah,
set
yeah.
on. Well, in a sense, that's what our mind does because we have been teaching it to do that for the longest time. So this is the importance, Piotr, of sustained practice, of entering samadhi. And you know about this. We've practiced together. You disappeared for a few years, but I'm sure the practice was not completely gone. But you've come to the Hermitage. We've done many retreats in Europe. It's wonderful to see you back again. But I can assure you the practice didn't just disappear. But you see, don't you, the necessity of what we might call the grunt work of sitting in samadhi, returning to this. If the mind wanders, seeing it for what it is and simply coming back, it's always here. The breath is always here. Sometimes you think, sometimes you don't, but the breath, the embodied
Mhm.
breath is always here. Simply return to that, settle in to that. And as you do, it takes time, but all of those thoughts, if you stop feeding them, you know, you've experienced it before in a retreat. They start
Yes.
to dissolve. They start to dissolve. Well, they'll come back again. So the need for sustained practice. It's not that we are creating enlightenment. We don't need to do that. All we need to do is to drop everything and see what's under your feet. But that does take discipline, not because the practice is difficult, but because you see what your mind is doing, don't you?
Yeah, as if
So
I
to
can.
bring it all into one, to bring it all into one. A koan can be very helpful for that, or the sitting itself. But if you find your mind just going off in trains of thought, use something to lock onto it. This is what, in a sense, a natural koan is. For some people, who is this? What is this? And this can, you see, bring you like an anchor down. So I would suggest take some time now, Piotr, that you're coming back to the practice and see what is it that's really driving you in the practice. And perhaps we can work that into a natural koan for you to keep you locked in a good way. You know what I mean, Piotr?
Nah, it's not completely clear about the koan part.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. A koan is not really necessary. You have everything you need already. A given koan is not necessary. You open up to yourself, and we can always be in touch with email, okay?
Yeah, okay.